an unfair advantage. So how can you ask us to follow the example of Christ? But supposing he didn't have an unfair advantage, supposing that what was true about Jesus as a Son of God is true of us, only a few of us know it. And we are pretty careful to be quiet about it, lest the same thing happen to us as happened to Jesus. And indeed it often does. Now, but why talk about this? Is it interesting? Is it important for the human being to realize that in some sense of the word, whatever it means, he is God or one with God? Well, the importance of it is this, that to know that you are God is another way of saying that you feel completely with this universe. You feel profoundly rooted in it and connected with it. You feel, in other words, that the whole energy which expresses itself in the galaxies is intimate. It is not something to which you are a stranger, but it is that with which you, whatever that is, are intimately bound up. That in your seeing, your hearing, your talking, your thinking, your moving, you express that which it is which moves the sun and other stars. And if you don't know that, if you don't feel that, well, naturally you feel alien, you feel a stranger in the world, and if you feel a stranger, you feel hostile. And therefore, you start to bulldoze things about, to beat it up, and to try and make the world submit to your will, and you become a real troublemaker. So I feel also one reason why you become hostile is that feeling that you were just brought into this place, that your father and mother went up to some monkey business that they probably shouldn't have done, or it was bad rubber goods, and as a result of this, here you are, and you didn't ask to be here. Well, you always feel you can turn around and blame them. You can blame somebody. You can blame the government. You can blame the rascals. You can blame the cheaters. Always supposing you yourself aren't a rascal, which is long odds. You always can blame someone and say, I didn't ask for it. And yet, very few people.
Having demons doing her friend is in the background trying not to laugh. Let's see. I guess I'll see for you. Just like a nervous laugh, like they don't know what's going on, or really laughing like she's been paid or promoted to do this. And she's like, wow, this is insane. So let's see if we can do it.
We've got to say yes to what happens. It's my karma. And that doesn't mean merely, because there are many misinterpretations of the doctrine of karma. It's usually popularly understood that what happens to you, either fortunate or unfortunate, is the result of good or bad deeds in a previous life. Well, that's popular superstition. The real meaning of karma, the word in Sanskrit means simply doing. And if I say of an event, it is your karma, it is saying it is your doing. So the exposition, a book which would expound karma, would be not so much a whodunit as a youdunit. But that seems fantastic. If you believe that God is a monarch, an absolute, omniscient, and omnipotent authority, shall we say a sort of cosmic ego, then to claim to be that is to introduce democracy into the kingdom of heaven. To usurp divine authority and to speak in its name without proper authorization. And they asked Jesus, by what authority do you speak? Or of men? And he was tricky about answering that one. He said, by what authority did John the Baptist speak? And they were nervous about answering that one. So the gospel of Jesus, which of course was hushed up from its inception, was that wake up everybody and find out who you are. Asking that, again in the Gospel of St. John, they, pointing to his disciples, may be one, even as you, Father, and I are one. And when he was accused of blasphemy, the Jews took up stones to stone him, you know. And he said, many good works have I shown you from the Father, and from which of these do you stone me? And they said, for a good work we don't stone you, but for blasphemy, because you being a man make yourself God. Now listen to the reply. He said, is it not written in your law, I have said ye are gods? And if that is what the scripture says, it can't be denied. So why do you tell me I blaspheme because I say I am a son of God? No answer. Because I said I am a son of God. It doesn't say that in your King James translation. It says I am the Son of God. And you'll see the italicized, and you will think that that is for emphasis if you don't realize that passages in italics in the King James Bible are interpolations by the translators. In Greek, leaving out the definite article is equivalent of having the indefinite article. Weos to theou is a son of God, not oios to theou. So, son of, in Hebrew and in Arabic, means of the nature of. When we call someone a son of a bitch, we mean bitchy. And so if you call someone a son of God, you mean divine.
They fucking hate white, normative men.
As the Nicene Creed subsequently
one more minimum payment down. I'll be out of debt in no time.
This being blasphemy for the Jews. It became blasphemy for the Christians or anyone else than Jesus to say it. They said, okay, baby, it was so with you, but there it stops. No more of this business. And as a result of that, Jesus was made irrelevant by pedestalization, by being kicked upstairs. In spite of the fact that he said, greater works than these that I do shall you do. Oh no, upstairs with you, baby, because we just can't have that sort of thing going on in a monarchical universe. We're not going to have democracy in the kingdom of heaven. So, this is why the gospel is impossible. Because we are supposed to follow the example of Christ. Where he says, for example, be not anxious for the morrow. Do not worry about what you shall eat, what you shall drink, and what you shall wear. Take care of it. Doesn't he take care of the birds? Don't the flowers grow? They're wonderful. They're crazy. They're great. What are you worrying about? I've never heard a sermon preached on that. Never. Because it's totally subversive. The economy would crash. So they say, oh, yes, that's all very well, but he was the boss's son. See, he had that colossal advantage. Take up your cross and follow him. Hey, but wait a minute. I don't know I'm going to be resurrected 3 days later. I can't do all those miracles. He had an unfair advantage. So how can you ask us to follow the example of Christ? But supposing he didn't have an unfair advantage. Supposing that what was true about Jesus as a son of God is true of us. Only Only a few of us know it. And we are pretty careful to be quiet about it, lest the same thing happen to us as happened to Jesus. And indeed it often does. Now, but why talk about this? Is it interesting? Is it important for the human being to realize that in some sense of the word, whatever it means, he is God or one with God? Well, the importance of it is this, that to know that you are God is another way of saying that you feel completely with this universe. You feel profoundly rooted in it and connected with it. You feel, in other words, that the whole energy which expresses itself in the galaxies is intimate. It is not something to which you are a stranger, but it is that with which you, whatever that is, are intimately bound up. That in your seeing, your hearing, your talking, your thinking, your moving, you express that which it is which moves the sun and other stars. And if you don't know that, if you don't feel that, well, naturally you feel alien, you feel a stranger in the world, and if you feel a stranger, you feel hostile. And therefore, you start to bulldoze things about, to beat it up, and to try and make the world submit to your will, and you become a real troublemaker. So I feel also one reason why you become hostile is that feeling that you were just brought into this place, that your father and mother went up to some monkey business that they probably shouldn't have done, or it was bad rubber goods, and as a result of this, here you are, and you didn't ask to be here. Well, you always feel you can turn around and blame them. You can blame somebody. You can blame the government. You can blame the rascals. You can blame the cheaters. Always supposing you yourself aren't a rascal, which is long odds. You always can blame someone and say, I didn't ask for it. Take it away. And yet, very few people are all too ready to take it away. And if you don't say take it away, what are you going to do? You've really got to take responsibility for it. You've got to say yes to what happens. It's my karma. And that doesn't mean merely, there are many misinterpretations of the doctrine of karma. It's usually and popularly understood that what happens to you, either fortunate or unfortunate, is the result of good or bad deeds in a previous life. Well, that's popular superstition. The real meaning of karma, the word in Sanskrit means simply doing. And if I say of an event, it is your karma, it is saying it is your doing. So the exposition, a book which would expound karma, would be not so much a whodunit as a youdunit. But that seems fantastic. If you believe that God is a monarch, an absolute, omniscient, and omnipotent authority, shall we say a sort of cosmic ego, then to claim to be that is to introduce democracy into the kingdom of heaven, to usurp divine authority, and to speak in its name without proper authorization. And they asked Jesus, by what authority do you speak? Of heaven or of men? And he was tricky about answering that one. He said, by what authority did John the Baptist speak? And they were nervous about answering that one. So the gospel of Jesus, which of course was hushed up from its inception, was that wake up everybody and find out who you are. Asking that, again in the Gospel of St. John, they, pointing to his disciples, may be one, even as you, Father, and I are one. And when he was accused of blasphemy, the Jews took up stones to stone him. And he said, many good works have I shown you from the Father, and from which of these do you stone me? And they said, for a good work we don't stone you, but for blasphemy, because you being a man make yourself God. Now listen to the reply. He said, is it not written in your law, I have said ye are gods? And if that is what the scripture says, it can't be denied. So why do you tell me I blaspheme because I say I am a son of God? No answer. Because I said I am a son of God. It doesn't say that in your King James translation. It says I am the Son of God. And you'll see the "the" italicized, and you will think that that is for emphasis if you don't realize that passages in italics in the King James Bible are interpolations by the translators. In Greek, leaving out the definite article is equivalent of having the indefinite article. Weos to Theou is a son of God, not oios to Theou. So, son of, in Hebrew and in Arabic, means of the nature of. When we call someone a son of a bitch, we mean bitchy. And so if you call someone a son of God, you mean divine. Of the nature of God. As the Nicene Creed subsequently defined it, he is of one substance with the Father. But what happened was that this being blasphemy for the Jews, it became blasphemy for the Christians, for anyone else than Jesus to say it. They said, okay, baby, it was so with you, but there it stops. No more of this business. And as a result of that, Jesus was made irrelevant by pedestalization, by being kicked upstairs. In spite of the fact that he said, greater works than these that I do shall you do. Oh no, upstairs with you, baby, because we just can't have that sort of thing going on in a monarchical universe. We're not going to have democracy in the kingdom of heaven. So, this is why the gospel is impossible. Because we are supposed to follow the example of Christ. Where he says, for example, be not anxious for the morrow. Do not worry about what you shall eat, what you shall drink, and what you shall wear. Take care of it. Doesn't he take care of the birds? Don't the flowers grow? They're wonderful. They're crazy. They're great. What are you worrying about? I've never heard a sermon preached on that. Never. Because it's totally subversive. The economy would crash. So, that's all very well, but he was the boss's son. See, he had that colossal advantage. Take up your cross and follow him. Hey, but wait a minute. I don't know I'm going to be resurrected 3 days later. I can't do all those miracles. He had an unfair advantage. So how can you ask us to follow the example of Christ? But supposing he didn't have an unfair advantage. Supposing that what was true about Jesus as a son of God is true of us. Only a few of us know it. And we are pretty careful to be quiet about it, lest the same thing happen to us as happened to Jesus. And indeed it often does. Now, but why talk about this? Is it interesting? Is it important for the human being to realize that in some sense of the word, whatever it means, he is God or one with God. Well, the importance of it is this, that to know that you are God is another way of saying that you feel completely with this universe. You feel profoundly rooted in it and connected with it. You feel, in other words, that the whole energy which expresses itself in the galaxies is intimate. It is not something to which you are a stranger, but it is that with which you, whatever that is, are intimately bound up. That in your seeing, your hearing, your talking, your thinking, your moving, you express that which it is which moves the sun and other stars. And if you don't know that, if you don't feel that, well, naturally you feel alien. You feel a stranger in the world. And if you feel a stranger, you feel hostile. And therefore, you start to bulldoze things about, to beat it up, and to try and make the world submit to your will.
California, and that's why they kick everyone's ass and everything. When you're doing mortgages and you're in real estate, guess what? Most of the lenders that lending on your properties in Alabama and North Carolina, where are they from? They're from California because they take the chances.
Do you know the U.S. Solar Company's nasty little secret? It turns out if you live in Illinois, they have to give you.
Welcome to Being in the Way with Alan Watts. I'm Mark Watts, your host, and today's talk is On Being God, which was recorded in 1971 in New York City at a conference on Western therapy and Eastern religions. Like last week's talk, Zen Bones, it's a big hall presentation given to hundreds of people who attended the conference. And in it, my father explores both Western therapy and Western religions in relationship to the mystical experiences or altered states that are the basis of Eastern religions. He points out that neither Western therapy nor Western religions are particularly equipped to deal with individuals who've had these experiences. And in the course of the talk, he invites everyone there to participate with him in a clinical experiment in which he positions himself as a patient who's had one of these experiences and believes himself to be God, and invites the audience to ask any questions they like. The results are lively, at times hilarious, and definitely enlightening as he pivots from idea to idea and question to question and delivers a remarkable performance. And now here's Alan Watts in On Being God.
Between Western psychology, psychiatry, and psychotherapy, and the so-called religions of Asia, there is common ground, because both are interested in changing states of human consciousness.
What do you want to talk about?
I don't know. I'm just curious what you're doing. That's all.
Oh yeah. I'm about to make some coffee and listen to this, but we can talk briefly if you want to talk about something.
Yeah, I mean, just curious if you're just doing a replay of something else. That's all. But I'm an atheist, so
Oh, that must be so exhausting.
On Clubhouse, yes, it can be. But I've been doing it for 40 years, so I'm kind of used to it by now.
So why do you think there's no God?
I haven't been given good enough evidence to believe in one.
So
I think it's possible.
Okay.
I'm an agnostic.
Well, this is like your 40-year journey to get here to talk to some bald asshole who's playing Alan Watts because
that's it, man. It's all about this.
I'm not playing just like any recording. This is a very, very intellectual recording. And I think, by the end, you might be convinced that you've been looking in all the wrong places, or the information you've been given to you is just a distraction and pointing you away from the truth, which is that most likely you, myself, and all these Clubhouse, Clownhouse people are in some aspect a manifestation of God, and you just don't know it. It's a very hard thing to detect. I would call it the X factor, a variable, which is like a fourth variable, which is just super hard to comprehend, difficult to feel, difficult to know. And it's a mystery or a secret. And I think through occult science, you can get closer, even though God recedes, like my hairline. Nonetheless, there is some profound mystery or riddle, which, you could say is like the Sphinx. There's something there that unless you study, you're not going to have any comprehension of it, because it is an education-based experience. You can't just, the evidence you have seen or been presented with has been insufficient to convince you. But I hope that you stick around and you listen to this recording, because I've listened to it a few times, and this is near the end of Alan Watts's life, and he summarizes very clearly his opinions and information he has gathered throughout his life. So I encourage you to listen to it. I'll pin the link if you don't have the time.
Yeah, I would say pin the link and I'll watch. I probably won't be able to stay here too long, but I've encountered Alan Watts in my 40 years. So, it's just not an unknown quantity to me. So,
well, he declares what a lot of people declare, that we are God in drag.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, since I don't have a God concept. So,
well, it means that you're a divine being or a mortal.
But that's redundant. That's like, okay, so I'm a divine being. I don't have a divine being concept.
Well, the whole point is essentially joy now, meaning that what do you have anxiety about? What are you worried about? What are you depressed about? What are you angry about? Don't you know the good news? The good news is in the gospel is that you have eternal life, and chances are you've been doing this for a long time, forever, really, and you're just unaware of it. It sounds ridiculous.
Unaware of it. How can I detect it?
Through words. It's the only real way to play the game, and it is like a game, meaning that it's like a game of one-upmanship. But really, the thing is, you have to look at it as global, meaning that the Japanese, the Hindus, the Chinese, the Americans, the British, the French, like everybody's doing this same God game. So I don't know. The point is joy now, really, in many ways, meaning that I think a lot of atheists just have a lot of anger and pent up rage. And I love, well, then that's great. But there are a lot of very feisty atheists that.
You do realize there's a lot of really feisty fundamentalist Christians and a lot of angry Muslims too, right?
Oh, yeah, they're even worse.
Yeah, so it's like there's angry people there's probably even angry followers of Alan Watts, so.
Oh, there are. You could talk to Heron Stone on here. Do you know Heron?
Oh, yeah, he's in that job.
He's angry. He's angry. I'm like, what are you so angry about? Don't you know the good news? He goes, anyways, but this is religious history, but I don't know. To me, it's just once you buy enough books, have enough old books, it is a database. So in my opinion, a lot of atheists aren't working with a large enough data set in the debate.
Why do you say that about atheists and not about theists?
Because it's kind of funny. Imagine if there were no Jews or Christians and Muslims were the only theists you could deal with. I would still say that like 9 out of 10 times they might make the wrong choice, but that 1 out of 10 times because of their belief in God, they'll make the right choice. But a theist.
Yeah, but they're also highly illiterate too. So, I mean, the atheists that I know are highly literate, and most of the fundamentalist Christians and Muslims and whatever Abrahamic bullshit you want to pile on top of it are the most uneducated, illiterate people that I've met. And I've been doing this for 40 years, and I was a literature major, and I have 1,000, 1,200 books in my apartment, so it's not about my literacy.
Well, I'll go back to that X theory or the X factor, the unknown variable that, the theist could have the advantage versus the intellectual atheist in the long run. Maybe not in the short run, but
how so?
That there could be some type of X variable or a fourth or a presence unknown or undetectable, which is what we could call it.
Though? It's like for judgment or for reward or for to what end is this thing?
For mystery and for delight, or for
So reward of some sort.
Not reward per se, but I would just say that it's like it's like
sort of a woo version of Pascal's wager.
Yeah.
And Pascal's wager is just logically incoherent. So this kind of follows that to me. It's like, sure, there could be something, but until its rules are clear, until its message is clear, until there's evidence for it existing, I don't give a flying fuck about it.
No, I understand. Welcome, El Normo. For example, there are some. Hey, El Normo. Good morning. You want to say anything?
Hi.
Hey, how are you doing?
Good. How are you? This is got to be a funny conversation. I find atheists are just the angriest people and the most.
Okay, I'm done. Bye. You people just want to insult atheists. Bye.
No, we're not. Oh, he's. Is that white fragility or is that atheist fragility? I can't tell anymore.
Poor guy.
That's it. Well, he says he knows everything, that he has a master's degree. He spent all these years reading. He's a lit major. But anybody who claims they can have read everything, it's impossible. I mean, you know.
He's a clever fellow, clearly.
So what are you doing today?
I have work to do, man.
I know. I got a lot of things to do as well. I've been procrastinating for like a year.
Oh, that's just an ancient amount of procrastination.
It's not complete procrastination. It's coordinated, disorganized procrastination. But, you know, the credit card bill is due. So got to move some money around, get it paid. And my freaking tire. I just put 4 new tires on my car because the front tire kept losing air. And now the brand new tire in the back is losing air, which I didn't need to replace. And it's sub-zero outside. So I got to like leave it at the Firestone. And anyways, see, to me, El Normo, the study of God, you know, gives you faith. And despite the fact that you may have setbacks, expenses that you have to incur, the whole thing is, are you going to get angry about it? Are you going to get depressed, morass about it? Like, or do you just keep going and continuing and know everything is going to work out? I mean, that's the way I view an understanding in God. And I just, you know, I love debating these atheists on this app because they really do get so emotionally freaked out and angry over the debate about God. So what is that? Is that lack of EQ and IQ? Because I think EQ, IQ go hand in hand.
No, they feel forsaken by God. They feel that they're hurt. It's always guys, by the way. Mostly guys. I mean, there's one woman for every, 500 guys on this. The women are inherently spiritual. No, they feel that daddy abandoned them. They feel very rejected. Their feelings are hurt. It's normal.
Well, I mean, that guy wouldn't say his emotions were hurt. He would say I asked him in the beginning, he said, I've never been presented or discovered any evidence to suggest that God is real.
I offered him some the other day. I said, okay, let's say 1 million people say that their spiritual practice, their religious practice, made their lives better in these 12 ways. The main thing, one of the main things that really got my attention was when my kid was young and he had a friend who had this heart disease. His friend, my son had a little friend who's had heart disease, young boy. I can't remember the kid's name, but he was an Asian kid. So then we went to a wedding, and I was hanging out with the pediatrician. I said, this kid has this disease, and the pediatrician said, oh, he's not going to live very. I said, wow, that's incredibly disturbing. It's terrible. How do people deal with that? And he said, well, to tell you the truth, I found that people who, he said, fundamentalist Christians deal with these sorts of tragedies the best. So I thought, given the terrible losses that often face us in life, there's a functionality to the attempt to connect to a power greater than yourself, to a God. And I sort of just took off from there, just thinking about the ways in which attempting to form and then forming a relationship with God can improve your life dramatically. And I said this to him the other day. And he just got really angry and he sent me down. I went into his room. He didn't really have anything. That's not evidence. He said, well, 1 million people, that's a lot of evidence, no? He refused to...
Yeah, but what if the only evidence is words in a book? I mean, and you can't accept that as evidence, well, then we're going to have to disagree, because the precondition to the negotiation is that this is a wordplay game, and we're exchanging words to try to prove our point. And when you have a very complicated paragraph, in many ways, it resembles a mathematical equation. And there's all this underlying subcontext to the communication. And they can't accept that you have to agree that we can only negotiate this through words. There might not be any physical evidence.
But there is evidence. As I said, there's evidence of the beneficial effect of this practice. I mean, and I don't know what you mean by true, but I mean, I'm not saying that there's a guy floating in a cloud, which is, by the way, what I think of when I was a kid. I mean, it's not Scooby-Doo or Pixar. You know, this is grown-ups with a spiritual practice / religious practice. Pretty universal. I mean, it's rare for people to reject that. And the reason why it's rare is because the benefits are so palpable. These are my arguments anyway. I don't mean to cut you off.
Great insight. And the thing is, all communication is hypnosis. So at the end of the day, you do want to be selective with the words, because you can hypnotize.
He's taking a play out of my playbook. I read that in a neurolinguistic programming book, that all communication is hypnosis. And it does seem to be a maxim or an aphorism in many ways. And it's a good way to wake up from, your indoctrination, for good or bad, I think it frees people with that statement, both ways. It's like a double-edged sword.
I mean, if it's meaningful to you. I'm not big on placards and cliches.
Well, I have this book on aphorisms and maxims, and from an intellectual or a therapeutic perspective, it's invaluable, because it's got entries from hundreds of people that have lived extraordinary lives, and their one little sentence is an absolute truth, and it's sort of irrefutable. So I don't know. To me, there is a category of study, you could call it Torah, you could call it wisdom, but it supersedes a lot of these opinions that you'll hear on this app. And it's amazing how you don't have these types of debates in the real world. You don't just stop everything and start talking about atheism or God. You just continue and go about your way. But on this app, we have this armchair philosophers or ardent atheists, and in many ways there's not enough time to do a very comprehensive conversation and debate, even though some of these rooms may go on for hours, days, months, weeks, years. And that's why I say all communication is hypnosis, because a lot of the people who have these firm beliefs in Jesus or God, they're just like floating, but they're not swimming, and they're sort of stuck. And so, I like Alan Watts a lot, because he says, when you get the message, hang up the phone. And, I struggle with that myself, where, okay, well, you got the message, but you're still not engaging in any activities or actions with the knowledge. So, it's kind of like, well, you went to college to become an astrophysicist, but you're working at McDonald's. What did you do with the knowledge that you acquired is really the important part of the acquisition of knowledge or wisdom. I mean, what are you going to do? Some people might say doing nothing is doing something. Some people might say something comes from nothing. But anyways, I mean, this is like philosophy for fun, and that's the shame in a lot of the attitudes of the atheists, really, is I think they're missing the gamemanship of the debate, the fun of it, the joy that it produces. I really like debating atheists, and many of them come back and say, actually, you know, Adrian, aka John, some of the things he says is thought-provoking, and he is a sincere person. He's not just a troll, even though I believe in trolling and disrupting to try to break people's patterns on this app, because in many ways it's not a healthy activity that a lot of people are doing here. It's definitely a dopamine addiction, and they're not, you know, developing themselves as men. So to me, this is the perfect place to pontificate as a philosopher, because you can't get punched in the nose. That's what Socrates says. It's not popular now in Rome to be a philosopher because you get your nose broken in. But here, you know, it's a safe space. Okay, do you want to say anything else? Allegedly, yeah. Allegedly. But it's a glorious day. It's 9/11 right now. How many more days? 7 more days till our glorious orange swears in. And I'm, you know, very nervous. I hope it all goes well, but I have heard things that suggest that there could be interruptions, and Trump should have alternative strategies in place to prevent, you know, any disruptions. But I am confident that Trump is aware of the threats, and I hope he knows that the Secret Service, some of them might be traitors, because I don't know, that assassination attempt, like that's all you need to know is that DEI is so cooked into every single agency that if you think the Secret Service is, you no need to talk about it, but I think you get the drift that this is not over, that Trump is the number one. I mean, he is the most hated person amongst so many people that it's very dangerous for him and dangerous for the country. I mean, he's got a good backup, but anyways, I'm going to play this Alan Watts clip. Anybody else want to say anything? Uncle, Danielle, Giorgio, El Normo?
Danielle is a nice person.
I just want to say Normo is a nice person. Communications hypnosis. Let's start the morning off with a good meditation.
Rabbanu Shalom to you.
Rabbanu Shalom. Master of the universe. See, that's the thing about Rabbanu Shalom. Is the master of the universe listening? I mean, a lot of people pray silently, you know, but imagine if the universe heard everything you ever said and is always watching. I mean, if you pray out loud and you do tshuva, or, you know, you have repentance, I mean, does God listen to your prayers? I would say yes. And from an atheistic perspective, even if you say there is no God, by doing talk therapy or praying out loud or asking the universe for what you want, in many ways, it's like a self-correcting algorithm, and you are creating a list of prioritizations for yourself. So in many ways, what you're doing is just prioritizing, and most people need that in their lives. And you know, you don't need a computer to do it. You can wake up every day and know exactly what your priorities are. You don't even need notes. Okay, does anyone else want to say anything before I unleash Alan Watts into the room? Does Dude want to say anything? I think he's a Buddhist. But Dude, I think, is also very emotional. That's the thing, is like, when, you know, if you got great faith in God, there's no reason to get angry. There's no reason to lose your temper, you know, and I am definitely guilty of that in my life, getting very angry, very angry. You know, I've never committed any crimes, but I know why people commit crimes, because they're so angry. Anger is the mind killer. But I think you're going to really like this Alan Watts information. What I want to do is just fast forward to the fourth portion of this. This is called, and I think I pinned the link to the top. Yeah, it's called Alan Watts on Being God, Being in the Way, hosted by his son, Mark Watts. And I think this is an excellent example of Watts at his finest. It's when he's closer to the end of his life. And he basically declares that he is God and that you are God. But not many people talk about that. And this is a way to look at God, though maybe it's not true, but nonetheless, it is an extremely interesting perspective. So I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you have a cup of coffee and you all have a great day. God bless.
If it did, we wouldn't know that that was up. So it goes down some of the time so that we can know when it goes up, because if we didn't know when it went up, it would be like being in a space where everything was light. There'd be nothing to write home about. There would be no black marks on the space. And so it would be like a piece of perfectly empty paper. Similarly, to be in a completely black space would also be a kind of unconsciousness with nothing to write home about. Because there'd be nothing would make any difference. So therefore, if you're going to have black, you won't know that it's black unless you have some white. And if you're going to have white, you won't know that it's white unless you have some black.
Why do you think there's all love one another? Because if we get to that point, there won't be any of these ups and downs. We'll have to tell you.
Correct, but that's not a teaching, it's a koan. A koan. A koan is a Japanese word for a spiritual problem used in Zen Buddhism, such as, what is the sound of one hand? And these problems are given to those who ask questions concerning their spiritual development. And sometimes, as St. Paul pointed out, commandments are given not in the expectation that they will be obeyed, but in the expectation that they will reveal something to those who hear them. That was St. Paul's comment on the whole Mosaic law. Yes, sir.
If we accept the peace.
What?
If we accept the peace, China, to see that we are all God.
Yes.
One of the hereafter. Is there a heaven? Is there a purgatory? Is there a hell?
The hereafter is, of course, now. Because if you will examine it closely, there is no when else than now. And if you want to make hell of it, you can make hell of it. If you want to make heaven of it, you can make heaven of it. Purgatory, purgatory. It's all here. Always was, always will be. What is death? Death is an undulation in consciousness. How would you know you were alive unless you had once been dead? Yes.
God, the same way that Jesus is your God, why was it unnecessary for him to have material possessions necessary for you?
It wasn't unnecessary for him to have material possessions. They said of St. John the Baptist that he was an ascetic, but of Jesus, this man consorts with gluttoners and wine-bibbers and comes eating and drinking. And when the Lady Mary poured precious ointment on his feet and anointed him, they said the same thing that the members of the vestry say to the minister today. Why this great expense? Couldn't it all have been sold for much money and given to the poor?
Everybody's a problem.
It is a problem, sure. But you see, in many ways, when you get down to these very deep ethical problems, where there sure is no easy decision one way or the other, you must look at the problem from the point of view of an artist. Which way of doing this is in some sense greater? It may be better to go off with a bang than with a whimper. Let me see.
All the time. I mean, in consciousness all the time.
There is no time, my dear. It's always now.
During every event in space-time. At every precise moment.
Oh, yes, if you put it that way, of course. consciously, not necessarily, because that would spoil the fun.
That's what I'm asking.
If you press button surprise, you press the button so that you forget who you are.
Right, so that you don't always know all the answers to a given problem.
Yes, that's perfectly true. This is called, in the Bible, kenosis. In St. Paul's epistle to the Philippians, he says, "Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, thought not equality with God a thing to be grasped, but humbled himself, and made himself of no reputation, and was found in fashion as a man, and became obedient to death." And so you get from this the kenotic theory of creation, held by some of the Greek fathers, that the creation of the universe is the self-emptying or self-forgetting of the Godhead. Yes, I think it's your turn now.
How does your concept of the creation of evil, so that man could see how good is different from the old story of a man getting his head against the wall so you feel how good it is and stuff?
It's really rather like it. Because the universe is fundamentally a system which creeps up on itself and then says, "Boo." And then it laughs at itself for jumping. And you see, every time it does it, it forgets that it did it before. So it never becomes a bore. Yes, the lady in red.
Can you make yourself into a point of consciousness that travels around the cosmos, such as Dr. Lilly was speaking of last night in talking about Satori?
Yes, but it isn't necessary to travel. The question is, can I make myself into a point of consciousness and travel around the cosmos and see things from all sorts of places? I say, yes, but it isn't necessary to travel. One is already there. In other words, I'm using your eyes where you are, like you're using mine. Just in the same way, my head is not my feet, it uses my feet. The head is very different from the feet. You couldn't possibly say the head and the feet are the same, but they are one organism.
They each have a soul.
Two.
What do you do about boredom?
What do I do about boredom? Press button surprise.
Oh, it's always there.
Yes, always. Yes, the lady in purple here.
You talk about boredom. It seems to me, at least in my own case, and maybe many people, that one of the biggest problems in life is being forced to earn a living as something which is not what you're valued doing. And I often wonder, is the answer to move somewhere and live on less money and do the things that I would like to do, or must I resign myself, as many people have, to do the thing that gets me the bread, and then in my spare time, somehow try to make up for the many days and weeks and years of this kind of happy living? What is the answer?
Well, there are two sort of answers, one of which you've already indicated, which is to do with less and do what you want.
Should be more.
Which,
When did that, those things, the medical things that we sort of accepted as part of life, wouldn't get done.
I think the objection, if everyone did that, is rather like asking what would happen if everybody wanted to catch the 4 o'clock train from Grand Central to Westport. Or if all the molecules of air in this room were suddenly to congregate over in that corner. There is a bare chance that it might happen, but very low. Yes.
Would you say we're going around in circles trying to eliminate evil because we never will? There might not be any evil.
Yes.
Eliminated, so we're just playing games.
We are going round in circles. But you see, going round in circles, as you may have observed by looking at the sky, is what the universe is doing. You see, before,
As long as we recognize one, we're all right.
yes. Yes, that's the thing. It's a dance. And when you dance, you don't dance to get somewhere. Yes, all right, but when you wake up, you turn the confusion into a dance. And so I go back to your question. What is the alternative to clearing out of the job you're doing? And to say doing with less but having more fun. Well, there are ways of making almost any activity into a dance. Supposing you had to drive a bus in New York, which is a very harrowing job in the ordinary way, you must not take seriously anything about it. This is the first rule. That it doesn't matter a damn if you don't get there on time, but it would be fun to go as fast as is consistent with safety. And therefore, you swing that bus, and you play things with the horn. You take the whole thing lightly, as if it is not serious. Because this is the nature, say, in ritual, when you have a procession. Now, people who don't understand religion don't know how to make the right kind of processions. There are those who go in military march, and they don't understand it because their objective is to get there. There are those who dawdle like ducks, and they don't understand because they are trying to be dignified. On the other hand, there are those who walk as if they had already arrived. And this is the way kings walk. Because a king is the center, and he is always where it's at. Where it's at is where the king is by definition. So, if you work in this way, people who are practicing meditation take up monotonous things for fun. And meditation is supposed to be fun. I hope John Lilly told you that this morning. Where you say you're going to do Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. You know, you can really have a gas doing that. And so that anything monotonous can be treated in the same way. This is one of the ways of overcoming boredom. Because boredom's the great problem for energy. See, energy is always on the go. Yes, sir. Yes, the gentleman in the white shirt here.
Does it bother you to be called mythic sometimes by people who like the idea of your existence?
Mythic? No. Mythic is a great word. The question is, does it bother me to be called mythic? No. Myth is very powerful. Myth is fun. Myth is stories told to children. Everybody loves them. Yes, sir. What? Is God omniscient? Well, it depends what you mean by the word. A lot of people think that omniscience is like knowing everything that's in the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's not omniscience, that's intellectual elephantiasis. Now, you see, let me explain this question because it's always important. And when anybody announces that he or she is God, people say at once, well, will you tell us in millimeters the height of Mont Blanc? When I say look it up in the encyclopedia, it's there. The thing is this. What we ordinarily call knowledge is the translation of life into words. And that is a very cumbersome process because if we had to translate the process into words every time we took a breath, we'd never get around to it. It takes so long to describe and think through the whole physiology of breath. Therefore, we do it without thinking about it. And I find that I'm shining the stars in just the same way. I mean, if you want it in words, it's going to take us a long time to get through them because words are strung out in a line.
Does that make sense that internally we are, and we are all gods? How come as gods, since you are saying we are all gods, therefore I am God, how come I find such difficulty to recognizing, understanding, or finding this tranquility within myself?
How do you if you are God, how do you find such difficulty in finding peace and tranquility in yourself? That's because you're looking for it away from the place in which you are. You are seeking it apart from the experience which you have at this moment. And you are regarding that experience and saying, that's pretty lousy, I'd like something better than that. But the trouble with that is that it splits you in two pieces. And once you're split in two pieces, you're lost. Because you've made a difference between the experience you are now having on the one hand and yourself who is having it on the other. And you wish you could get away from that experience. Now, the truth of the matter is you can't, because you are what you experience. It's a myth purely that there is some sort of experiencer who has the experience. You are what you know, because it is not I know something. There is simply a process called the knowing. You could say the knowing, like the world, has two poles, north and south. And so the knowing ball has the knower and the known, but only in that sense. Now, knowing changes. It changes itself. But if you try to stand outside it and change it, it'll be like standing outside your hand and trying to move your hand from outside. And so comes the difficulty. In other words, this would be the difficulty for God in the press button surprise situation, where you think you want something different from what you have. But if you do think that, you've got to ask yourself the question, what it is that you really want. This is the most fundamentally important question. And you will find, if you go into it very, very deeply, that you have it. Now, you may change your mind about it, but you do have what you want.
God, if this place caught on fire, I would find myself so scared that I wonder if I would also feel that I was God, and if I am God and scared, what do I do about that?
Well, one of the ways of not being bored is to scare yourself.
Yes.
Don't we all go to the movies just to be scared? We put certain limits on it, indeed, before we go and say well, this isn't really going to happen. It's only a play or a movie. And therefore, while we see the safe outline of the proscenium arch, back in the back of our minds as a sort of hintergedanke, we know it's only a play.
I'm talking about when it isn't only.
How do you know it isn't? If you see, after all, the task of the actor on the stage is to come on so well that the audience thinks it's real. So that he has them crying, so that he has them shaking with fear, so that he has them sitting on the edges of their chairs. Well, that's just one ordinary Joe Dokes actor, but supposing the actor of the...
Okay, I'm gonna read this. This is from an introduction to Zen. This is the 100th page. It's D.T. Suzuki. The foreword is by Carl Jung, and then we'll go right back to Alan. It says, according to the Mahayana Sastra, quoted in the Jnana Paramita, systematically expounded by Chisha Daiichi, the founder of the Tai sect, Dhyana is practiced in order to fulfill the 4 great vows cherished by every pious Buddhist. Dhyana is the storage of good wisdom and the farm of blissful merits. Like unto water free from impurities, jhana washes all the dust of passion. Dhyana is the armor wrought of Vajra, which shields the wearer from the arrows of evil desires. Though you may not yet have attained to a state of non-doing, you are already gaining towards nirvana, for you will gain the Vajra Samadhi. You will break in pieces the hindrances and restrictions. Though mountain high they are, you will attain the 6 miraculous powers, and you will be able to deliver numberless beings when the dust of annoyance rises so high as to screen the heavenly sun. Great showers may wash it away, the wind of intellectual enlightenment may remove it, but it is dhyana that will destroy it altogether.
The play is the real big actor. Wow, that play would seem real. So that's what happens when the house cat is on fire. Yes, lady in red. Yes, you're looking behind yourself.
God, what is sleep for you?
What is sleep? The seventh day. What? When is the seventh day? When you sleep. Yes.
Yes, God. The only reason I know that I'm God is because I take the responsibility for it.
Yes.
Does that answer the lady's question about fire?
Oh, yes, that also would answer it, yes. It's a question of taking responsibility for what happens.
What happens if you don't do anything about it?
If I don't do anything about the world?
The boredom.
The boredom.
What's through the
Well, that's another way. That's another way. You can explore boredom. You can bore into boredom and watch it. Sometimes when you're bored, that's the only thing to do. Because even for God, you can't lift yourself up by your own bootstraps. Because that is by nature of the definition impossible.
You said that a lot of you would enjoy having a myth of you.
Yes, I think that would be fun. I mean, why else does one go on stage except to make myths? What? Excuse me, what did you say? What is my motivation for going on the stage? That is like asking, why is there a universe? Well, now, if you listened to George Leonard last night, George Leonard explained how children were befuddled by being taught to ask why about everything. Because you always look away from what you're asking about to its antecedents, and that won't lead you anywhere at all. Why am I here? And I answer that question. Then somebody says, well, why that? And then somebody says, well, why that? Why that? Why that? And you get back and back and back, and eventually you get tired of answering. And so fathers, when their children say, why, Daddy? Why? They say, oh, shut up and eat your lollipop. So, but what happens, you see, when we trace the causation of things into the past, it all begins to fade out in silence and no answer. Why? Because it didn't begin there. The universe begins now. It didn't begin in the past. And the past trails back from now like the wake of a ship.
If everything is and there's no time except now, what is the role of chance?
If everything is God and there is no time except now, what is the role of chance? Chance pairs with order. We'll say randomness, we'll call it, and it pairs with order. And it is part of the nature of order. If you know what you mean by order, you know that you mean contrast with randomness. And if you know what you mean by randomness, you know that you mean contrast with order. So if you want to have order, you must have randomness, and vice versa. Yes?
Did you have this much charisma before you discovered your true nature?
Yes, but it came out in a different way. Yes.
I think there's a sort of danger here, though the riddles are funny, and if you had time enough to think each one through, they'd be very profound. There's a certain danger of everything and everyone being God, because if you've really found yourself as God, then you know that certain things that you as God have created that don't personally affect you, you create for a reason, you stay out of them, and you aren't a do-gooder. But if you think you're God, and then you try to go into too much social action and change the evils of this world, you end up hurting yourself and a lot of people, and you're playing God, and you're not really being God.
Well, I admit to you, my dear, that this is a very, very dangerous conversation. And that I thoroughly agree with, but we didn't come here, did we, to play it safe? All profound ideas and profound questions are dangerous. It is dangerous to go into science, as we all know too well. It is dangerous to go into medicine, dangerous to go into writing, because the pen is often mightier than the sword. And so I don't think we should withdraw from certain things because they're dangerous. But I entirely agree with you that if I were, as it were, in the spirit of God to go about social reform, I would be failing to realize the construction of my own universe, which is that when you interfere with it, you've got to know exactly how you're interfering. Otherwise, the most amazingly unexpected things will happen. So when people ask for miracles, they don't realize what the miracles involve. I mean, if I turned the microphone into a rabbit, it's altogether possible that you might drop dead, because those events might be connected.
Did you ever study with Carl Jung?
Did I ever study with Carl Jung? I didn't study with him. I knew him, and I read a lot of his writings. Yes.
What's the notion of watching yourself, watching boredom, or being aware of yourself imply that there's a separation somewhere?
It does in a way, yes. And it depends how you're watching. There is a very interesting thing that comes up in this respect with regard to the Bhagavad Gita and to the Yoga Sutra, where they talk about the witness. There is, as it were, behind our ordinary self with its emotions and involvements, a witness self that does nothing more than perceive what happens. And this is the Atman, or the Purusha, which is not involved. And some of you, no doubt, especially in times of crisis, have suddenly discovered this sort of witness center behind everything that just isn't involved. Most terrible things can be going on, but the witness is impassive. Now, when we go into these states, we've got to be very careful of our descriptive language, because the descriptive language makes the witness seem something apart from what is happening in such a way that if we want to become really sort of skitsy and catatonic about things, we can always be withdrawn and go in and identify ourselves with a solitary and uninvolved witness, who is merely a hangout for the ego, as when the police raid a house in which there are burglars. And the burglars know they'll be caught if they're on the ground floor, so they go up to the first floor. So then the police come up to the first floor, they're up to the second, they get to the roof, of the open sky and the infinite. And in this way, this was why the Buddha did not teach about the Atman, the real self within us, because he knew people would use the real self as a hideout for the ego. And so when, say, Krishnamurti tries to explain this, he doesn't talk about the witness. He talks about awareness, and people say to him, but who is aware? What is aware? And he seems a little sticky in his answer here, because what is the matter is that the people asking the question are bewitched by grammar. They are using a language in which it is part of the grammatical convention that the verb always have a noun subject. Now, how on earth do verbs get started by nouns? I ask you. How can a thing start a process? Surely, this is really the same problem Descartes was wrestling with when he tried to find out how spirit could influence matter, or how mind could influence body. Because everybody knows that all proper ghosts walk straight through walls without disturbing the bricks. So how can the ghost in the machine, as Koestler put it, the soul in the body, how can it do anything to the body? There's no connection. Two different realms. The point is that when we're talking about this awareness, what we call thought, feeling, sensation, emotion, we could say in a very clumsy way is it's aware of itself. It's the very nature. There wouldn't be sensation without awareness. You don't have to have something which is aware of it, any more than you have to have a thing called lightning, which does something called flashing. The flashing is the lightning. And so awareness is the one who's aware of it. Could say this awareness, if I say I am aware, the word I, as William James suggested, is simply a word of position, like this or here. Awareness here. And your awareness there. Yes, sir.
It's like one great koan that belongs to the boy.
Yes, life is like one great koan. No, death is not the solution. It has no solution. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. You see, the thing is like this. This is what is hard for Westerners especially to understand. I said, if you understand the yang and the yin, you don't need to ask any further questions. And all you I Ching buffs ought to know this by now. What is not a component of Western common sense is that nothing is something. Now, that may sound a little contradictory, but I think I can explain it. We treat nothingness as if it were ineffective, as if it wasn't really important at all. And yet, when we look out at the night and we see all these stars in space, try and imagine what the heavens would look like if there weren't any space. Then obviously there wouldn't be any stars. I mean, you could think that they would all be jammed together in a lump. There are various objections to that. How would you see the edge of the lump and know it was a lump without space around it? Furthermore, we know when we investigate the constitution of matter physically, that at the atomic level, there's more space in something than there is anything else. Most of it is empty, and which led a physicist at the Argonne lab at the University of Chicago, who had become a little nutty. He was so impressed with the emptiness of matter that he went around in the most enormous padded slippers in case he should fall through the floor. So now what the point I'm making is this. If space is essential to solid, it's perfectly obvious then that nothing is essential to something. If you can't have something without nothing, it means nothing is pretty powerful stuff. Because something comes out of it. Like that. It's a dogma of Western thought expressed in the Latin phrase, ex nihilo nihil fit. Out of nothing comes nothing. But that's not so. Out of nothing comes something. Now you would say, well, if something comes out of nothing, there must be some kind of mystery inside nothing. It must have a secret structure of some kind. I mean, there must be sort of electrical goings on. This is the trouble they have about cosmology. How could this world generate? Could it just be out of free-floating hydrogen? No, it's just a much simpler idea than that. It comes out of real solid nothing. It's so simple.
You've been listening to Alan Watts in On Being God, delivered in New York City in 1971. It's from our Philosophy and Society series, and to download this and other similar recordings, please visit alanwatts.org. Today's broadcast was brought to you by the Ram Dass Be Here Now podcast network. Thanks for listening.
Okay, that's On Being God by Alan Watts. Hope you enjoyed that. Lord Pork, anything you want to say, Giorgio?
Powerful bull rush.
That was a powerful bull rush.
Pork chop, come up.